completely forgot to play. Sports isn't even fun for half these kids.
It's not.
Going straight to the top. Just put the sec on the clock. I am Rihanna's a shot. I'm going straight to the top.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Mike here with the Sports and the Real Shit podcast. We're coming at you once again with another episode. Joining me today on the podcast is my guest, Summer Montabone, former D1 track athlete, certified strength and conditioning coach, best-selling children's books, I should say, personal development and business coach, currently running the Fearless Academy of Women. We're going to have an interesting conversation today, I think. Stick around. If you have daughters, fellas, if you have daughters, ladies, this will be beneficial. Even if you don't have daughters, I think this will be a beneficial conversation on the state of youth sports and how it impacts both girls and boys, actually. So stick around, sit back and enjoy the conversation. Summer, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to conversing with you today.
Absolutely. So before we jump into the conversation about youth sports and helping girls and develop and grow in sports and things of that, I did want to touch on real quick. So you're a former Division I track athlete. You said you went to Tulane?
Yes.
Toledo.
University of Toledo, yes.
So you ran track. So a big topic of conversation right now in college sports is around NIL and essentially pay for play, right? Basketball players, football players in college sports essentially getting paid. Well, I'm not going to come to your school if, I don't get paid XYZ amount. And, there's been talk about, essentially changing that model now that the cat's out of the bag and these people at the top realize that college players, they're employees. They're essentially floating around the idea of paying these guys like out of the school's pockets, right? And what I've read is there's some concern that, if the football players and basketball players or revenue generating players get paid, what happens to the swimmers and these other athletes, who typically don't get brought up when it's time to talk about money? And I don't think people really consider that what happens. It's a free market, so, scholarships are at risk. What are your thoughts on that? Like, as a former D1 star, what are your thoughts on, hey, some people are going to get paid, some people aren't? Do you see, the schools losing scholarships, not being able to afford other sports, to pay other sports? What's your thoughts around that?
Sure. So first of all, I would call myself a D1 star.
Hey, you played D1, all right? Some of us never made anything.
But I guess just to back up for a minute, like I came from a school, so in high school, that when I was on the varsity volleyball team, we were wearing 1970s hand-me-down soccer jerseys. So like I came from that background, right? Like girls got nothing, right? We did not get anything new. So like going to college too, and again, this was a very, very long time ago. I think we only had one full ride on the track team. Like everything else. Yeah, there wasn't much, and right, even at a school like that for track. So, and eventually the boys track became a club team because they couldn't even afford it anymore. So fast forward, right? So fast forward to now, like we know the dynamic has always been like that, right? Like football typically is at the top, basketball. As far as like paying athletes, I'm going to share probably just a different perspective. When you go to college, you're supposed to be earning something. You're almost supposed to be putting in your time and education, like the value of education, right? Like I am all for scholarships because it's expensive. I'm all for scholarships. Mm-hmm. But what are we sometimes teaching people in the long run if we're giving everything? So now we're paying kids to go to school on top of it. And I guess then, well, what are they doing to bring in the revenue? So maybe my perspective is slightly different because I kind of earned and built my own way, right? Like trust me, I had to pay for my college. Like I said, we were not getting lots of money as an athlete, but that experience allowed me to become a business owner. So like I became a business owner, sold my business. Well, same thing with employees. I just look at it as like a lot of people then become entitled. So how does this trickle into our world, later on? So if they're paying athletes, there definitely needs to be parameters. And like you said, are they an employee? What are they doing then to bring in that revenue? And we know that some athletes struggle later on, right? With like being a good citizen in society and then, finding other careers outside of sports because their whole identity is sports. So are we starting this
Right.
pattern even earlier? So my perspective might be a little different, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. I think it's great that athletes can earn money, but we have to think about some of the long-term impact or how it's done. And then, like you said, is it taking away from other sports that might be, pushed to the side completely?
Yeah. So all valid points. I think what the counter to that, to your first point about, well, you got to earn it. And these guys are going to be like, well, of course I'm earning it, especially football players. They're going to say, my jersey. So I went to Florida State, right? And I played basketball with some of the football players, right? And these guys walked around campus, their jerseys, like other kids were wearing their jerseys. So they could be like, I'm generating revenue for this school since I got on campus. And, back then they, in quotes, right, they weren't making money. Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M generated billions of dollars for that school. So a lot of them can say, yeah, I've earned that money. I've generated far beyond what a scholarship would cost, right?
Mhm.
So then it's like, yeah, I deserve to get paid. But then to your other point about, well, learning how to handle money, what happens later on? Do you become, like you expect everything, as a handout? You become spoiled. Well, these guys are spoiled from the very, very beginning anyway. So that's not changing much. So I feel like there's two sides to the story, and I always side with, as a parent now, I
Mhm.
always side with people getting paid. But
Mhm.
I agree, I guess, with your point that, well, are we spoiling people? Are we creating entitled people who don't know later on how to truly earn a living because they're just given all this money at once?
Yeah, and okay, so the example you gave too is, first of all, so we have college athletes are kind of the 1% to begin with, right? Well, now you've got the 1% of the 1%, right? Like you gave the Johnny Manziel, right? So like we're talking about a very small population, but
Yeah.
sure, it's like, okay, if you are bringing in money, and I guess maybe it needs to be handled more like a business deal. So like what I mean? Like I said, my background is not
Hmm.
business. I mean, I ran into the same thing too, that sometimes employees might think XYZ, but you're like, wait a minute, if we're paying for the cost of goods and advertising and blah, 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 you know what I mean? Like also understanding all of that to give you the opportunity. Um, or like you said, certain contracts. So I don't know, maybe I'm not the right person, to look at that, because it seems like it's such an individual case. If like, okay, if you have a star athlete, like I said, who might actually be the 0.1% of the 1%, bring it in, that's like, sure, if you're the brand, right? They've become a brand. And as we know, like personal brand, like obviously LeBron is a personal brand.
Hmm.
And then we just saw Mahomes, right? I just saw the commercial the other day that Adidas is giving him a brand, right? So it's like that's a very
Really?
small thing that, yes, they've earned. So I don't know how much that applies to the general college athlete population, but I'm all for scholarships too, or allowing people, yes, other ways to earn money. Absolutely. Like if you're doing something to earn money, but I guess as a personal development coach too, and what I see is like there has to be parameters and guidance or mentorship. Like then these kids need a business mentor to learn how to be the face of their business, instead of being like, oh, here, we're just going to pay you, because we've seen, yeah.
Which is the problem, which is the problem, right? So in all this conversation, like I said, I'm all for guys getting paid, and in all this conversation about whether schools should be footing the bill and it's no longer NIL and, and people worrying about that. That one is probably the most legitimate concern is, are these kids being surrounded by people and coaching and mentors who are going to show them, even if they do get paid, show them how to keep that money? Because even if you get paid in college, it doesn't mean you're going to go pro in football and basketball. So that couple million that you make in college has to last you long enough, or you have to know how to make it multiply, right? Enough so that it sustains you to where you get a job, or you don't get a job, you invest it, whatever it is. And I don't know if anybody's talking about that. People are on one end saying, pay these guys. And on the other end, people are saying, nah, they're student athletes, don't pay them. That's what the scholarships are for. And nobody's talking about, well, the cat's out of the bag now. They're going to get paid. So how do we ensure that they don't end up broke 2 years after college and they didn't learn anything in college anyway because they don't go to class? So it's like they made a lot of money, and the cycle continues of broke kids looking for money instead of knowing how to actually work for money or build a business or invest to gain that money.
Yep.
So that's an interesting thought about it. I feel like, so to going back to the point of whether colleges should pay or not pay. Personally, I think the model right now is unsustainable. I think the end game is there will be no more college sports. So I think that's the true impact to track athletes, and softball players and swimmers. And like, if football and basketball totally change the model and these guys become employees, then I think, college sports is done for. And, kids who got scholarships to, ballet in college or whatever it is, gymnastics in college, that opportunity is going to be gone. So I think there's a huge red flags coming out of this that I don't know if people are thinking about, even those who aren't in the revenue generating sports.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Good talk on that. So something I know both of us are interested in. We both got kids. I got all boys. I don't think I told you I have 5 boys. And I recently started putting the older ones in basketball as of a couple years ago. And at that time, I recorded a podcast episode. I was like, there's no way, like, this is life. There's no way this is life because, and at that point, they were in like I-9. I don't know if you know what I-9 is, but it's basically intro to sports, right? Biology 101, even remedial, right? I even coached my boys for a little bit. And I promise you, I was teaching some of these kids like how to run properly, things that you and I learned in grade school, right? We didn't have to pay someone to teach us how to run. And now, my 2 older ones, I've put them in actual like basketball leagues or whatever. They have jerseys and actual seasons and, the games. And I find it to be a mess. And the system, especially around basketball, is so broken because parents are essentially, we've been sold this bill that your kid has to follow these steps in order, to go to college, make it pro, whatever it is. There is no longer the start in the schoolyard, in the backyard, with your friends at the park. And then if you want to, your parents want to put you in a league to go get coaching and then to move on. These kids start off, they're in a league and they're being coached. And my kids are playing basketball in front of fans. They barely know how to play basketball, but they're playing in front of fans. People are yelling from every direction. Parents in the stands are telling them what to do. Hey, go. They're countering what the coach is telling them. In practice, the coaches are yelling at them. They don't understand why. I was telling one of my players, I felt bad, but I was telling one of my players, this is like a 4th and 5th grade team. I was like, you can't be happy when someone scores on you. You got to be mad, trying to get them, to play better defense. You got to be more upset. And he was like, why should I get mad when somebody scores on me? And I'm like, what? This is elementary stuff, but he's in elementary school, duh. So I'm conflicted, right? Because I recognize where we are now as a society, especially around where I live. Like, there's no more parks. There's like schools don't really have full-time PE and things like that. So you're almost forced into throwing your kids into that situation. I find it very backwards. I want us to go back to where kids started learning on their own and then get to a point where if they want to go that route, they would go that route. I don't know how it is in other sports that you coach for and witness, but I feel like in basketball it's totally backwards. You being the expert in this, what is your take?
Oh, for sure. I'm right there with you. So it's in all sports, girls sports, every sport, right? So my background is physical education. My degree actually is in physical education.
Oh,
And over
okay.
25, 30 years ago, we were still fighting for physical education in schools, right? Like that was always the first thing to take away. Fast forward now, we've got technology. So like that's another dynamic, right? We've got all this technology and we're taking away physical activity at school. Well, you mentioned something, right? Play. We have completely forgot to play. Sports isn't even fun for half these kids.
It's not.
Yeah. And, again, with a background in teaching, I explain everything like math because people can relate to math. And I'm like, we have completely skipped addition and subtraction. Like you said, we're throwing kids into calculus, go play the game. And we're yelling and screaming at you because you don't know what to do, but yet nobody told you addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. Like we've skipped all that, right?
Amen.
Yeah. So that's like, and I would explain that to people in fitness too. So I'm really, my background, and when I teach kids, it's very foundational. It's very basic. I'm like, let's build off the basics. I started my kids young with just running form and how to run and how to move, very basic stuff. Because now you got kids, they might be this star baseball pitcher, but then they run like a baby giraffe to first base because nobody taught them how to run, right? Like, and I'm sure you've seen it on the basketball court. So I'm like,
Yes.
right? Develop just being physical and being an athlete and quit trying to specialize these kids now, because I mean, some people might see that I'm holding my kids back because like we don't go do all these private lessons. I might do a little bit of things here and there because, my kids don't always listen to me or my husband, but it's like we're teaching and developing them as an athlete. And so they're going to learn the skills in basketball, right? Like it's the basic stuff that we keep skipping that. And I'm right there with you about the whole, like, I don't know if that's a whole topic we're going to talk about, like the yelling and screaming, because I'm a lifelong coach.
Yes.
I coach forever. And I see all these volunteer, coaches, bless their heart that they're giving up their time, but they're not equipped to be coaching kids. They don't understand development. They don't understand mental maturity, emotional maturity. And from my perspective, we've got emotionally immature adults having expectations of kids, right? To behave a certain way when they're playing the sport. Like that's not you.
Oh my God. No. I'm just thinking back. So it is so true. And watching it on a basketball court. So listen, totally transparent, right? I agree with you 100%, but I'm also of the mindset that there is a certain level of toughness that comes in playing sports.
For sure.
So drawing that line and finding that right mix is tough. And I myself have fallen prey to wanting my kids to be tough because you don't know how to play basketball, but I at least don't want you to be crying every time you get bumped.
Oh, right. Yes, I see that a ton. I hate to say it in girls sports, and my girls are complete opposite. So my girls did Taekwondo, and actually my oldest, as a 10-year-old, was the first runner-up national champion in Taekwondo sparring. Okay, like the boys did not mess with her, right?
Wow.
And so my girls in softball, they'll get hit with the ball. They run to first base, they move on. You're right. Other kids, it's like we have to take a timeout. We're taking a knee.
Right.
And I'm not trying to be insensitive either, but I'm like, come on, are you actually hurt? So you're right. There needs to be a fine line, and the word toughness can be used in a lot of different ways. I guess for me, like I get frustrated when I see a coach yelling and screaming at a kid when the coach didn't properly communicate something or never taught. I've seen that so many times. You never taught that kid. So how can you expect them to know what you're talking about? So for me, I'm really big on communication and coaching, as well as like understanding learning styles, because sometimes you might have a kid that's like this diamond in a rough player that you're just not communicating properly with them, right? And that goes back again to teaching. So yeah, and the mental toughness, right? The same thing. But yeah, trust me, I'm right there with you. My girls sometimes have come home and they've been like, everybody cried in the dugout today except for me, you know. And so it gets hard for them too. But we have to understand there's different emotional maturity at different times. And then, you know, my big thing is, have we taught kids how to handle it? And that's one of the things that I started doing in with my workbooks, is why I did it, because of what I was observing, is like this big gap. Like, we're not teaching kids how to handle these situations, you know, and it's like they need to know that. We're barely teaching them how to field a softball and throw it properly, but yet we want them to know how to handle their emotions. So it's like, you can't always blame the kid.
It's a lot, and it all goes back to when you start, right? If you started playing, like, nobody really taught me the fundamentals of basketball, to be honest with you. Like, I just learned that, right? We played and we officiated ourselves in third grade and fourth grade and fifth grade, and by the time I got to middle school, I was ready to try out. My mom didn't know I was trying out for basketball. Well, she knew I was trying out, but she didn't know anything about, oh, go try out for basketball. I heard the announcement over the PA system and I wanted to try out for basketball. Same thing in high school. So I taught myself these things. It eventually led me to playing team sports and being coached. And that's where the whole skipping steps is. It's like, and you make a great point about, we're yelling at them about doing these things, but we never taught them to do that. And when we do teach them, they're taking it literal, especially in the early stages, right? If you say, hey, stand here and play this, particular type of zone defense, their mind, because they haven't played before, their mind isn't like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? How do I react, right? Do I just stand there like a robot? So we get mad at them for standing there like a robot. But we never told them, if somebody does this, react that way. They never learned that. So I don't know if it happens, in volleyball, track, whatever other sports that you're around and coach. But as a guy who played basketball growing up, I realized that fourth, fifth, sixth, even in middle school, eighth graders, my oldest is in eighth grade, and I'm watching these kids running around. I'm like, by the eighth grade, you should have known that, but you don't, because you don't get PE and you don't get to learn how to play these sports by yourself. Yeah. And then by the time you're playing it now, you have 100 people in a small gym yelling down at you while you're trying to listen to the coach. It's just a big mess. How do you fix that? So we know what the problem is. How do you think we fix that?
That's a good question, but you mentioned too, like, just going out and playing, right? And so that's why I say, as a society, like, are kids just going out and playing? No, they're either on their devices, anymore, and they just don't go out and play. So we've lost the art of play, and we've turned sports into, it has to be competitive. Everything's competitive.
Yes.
The model is backwards too, because it's like, oh, we're going to play 5 games, but we're only going to practice one time. And it's like, how do you learn? How do you develop? How do you get that, endurance, like you said? And then coaching certain things shouldn't be happening during the game, right? That's what happens in practice. It's like, you shouldn't be trying to learn a new strategy. And then you mentioned too, sports are a great way to learn how to problem solve. So if kids aren't out playing basketball on their own or flag football, you know what I mean? Like, isn't that how they learn different strategies and they problem solve on their own when they're just allowed to go out and play? So from my perspective, that's the biggest thing, is for getting to play. And, I put out these tips in a lot of different groups. And one of them was about, throwing a football for softball players, like how that helps, because so many people are like, play your sport. And a lot of the response was, well, who has time to go play flag football? And I was like, flag football. I'm saying, go out in the backyard and toss a football. You know what I mean? Like, people can't even think that way and everything has to be organized, right, and competitive, and we have forgotten to play.
That is so true. And we make excuses for it, right? Well, we don't have the time, you know. Well, when they're around other kids, it's better to pay for them to be around other kids and to just, it's like, no, sometimes you just learn different things just by playing outside one on one and shooting the ball by yourself. Like we've lost that. And in basketball, people talk about how basketball in Europe is doing it much better than ours, and their kids are growing up to take over the NBA, whereas US kids are falling back. And a huge part of it is because our model is so backwards. Our model, when our kids are not developing and going up the ramp, they're more so being placed into a certain spot, and it's like, okay, sink or swim, and if you have the money you keep going, if you don't, you fall out. It's just totally messed up, man. I don't like to see. I feel like now that I'm coaching, I'm like part of it. But honestly, I feel kind of helpless. Like, what do I do? Open up my own gyms to let kids play? I don't know what it is anymore.
Right. No, you said it, right? It's like you have to kind of sometimes conform to these that, like, you know what I mean? And you hate to say it, it's like the peer pressure. Oh, everybody's doing it. This is how we play if you want to play. But you mentioned too the European model, and that, yes, people are talking about that, right? How colleges even are starting to recruit more European athletes because they know how they've been trained. And then you've got people in the US, and like I said, because I'm crazy, I spend some times in these groups hoping to educate people that want to argue with me that kid isn't 100% working out 6 days a week on the sport, and I'm like, you're crazy. I'm like, this is not even what research says. Research says you need to be doing different movement patterns. And like you mentioned, robots. So you're trying to turn this kid into a robot athlete. We've taken the fun out of it. It's no longer even fun. And like I said, it's like 1 out of 57 kids who play high school sports are going to become college athletes. So that's still a pretty small.
That's not bad.
So, let's also think about the long-term impact, right? Mentally, physically, because, I haven't checked the stats recently, but there was a little bit of a surge of female collegiate athletes and suicide because of the pressures. And we're not teaching kids the life skills, right, that come along with being an elite athlete or a high level athlete. And we've taken out the fun. And having worked with a lot of women who are often putting on a smile, pretending to be happy, when we go back and we look at it, it's like they're just not having fun anymore, right? So it's like, are these kids, we want to make sure they're still having fun playing sports, right? Sports teaches us a lot. I'm all about sports and leadership, but there has to be a fun component too, because we're taking that away for our kids. They're burning out earlier. And like you said, we're turning them into employees of sports. And again, that there really is a small percentage of people that's even going to apply to in the long term.
Absolutely. So you're a former D1 star. How do you, because I fight this internally myself. I'm competitive. I love sports. I compete at everything. So how do you, maybe your girls are like that already, right? My boys aren't like that innately, and probably because, I was late in getting them into sports. How do you fight the urge of trying to get your kids to be so competitive and driven at sports while also managing you're talking about, learning, life skills and, feeling under pressure so much that you want to commit suicide? How do you balance that with kids and the people you speak to? Because I find that to be tough. Hey, I want you to be competitive in basketball. I want you to be tough out there and not let anybody bully you. But in the real world, I want you to be this nice guy and listen to your parents and be courteous to everybody. Adult athletes struggle with the same thing. So I'm like, I know for sure kids are having the same struggles. Do you get that feeling, that sense among parents you talk to that struggle? Like, what do you recommend to parents struggling to find that right balance?
Absolutely. So that's a good point, right? And so the other day, somebody reached out to me. He said he has a magazine, a sports magazine. He's like, I've been stalking you on social media. And he's like, you're having conversations that nobody else has, and it's about with the parents, how do you handle it and how do you talk to your kids? So, kind of going back to, we have to look at ourselves as adults. I mean, like I'm like a fanatical study, right, on personal development, personal growth, like that type of stuff. And I know a lot of other parents aren't. So I can't have the same expectation that they're going to have the same conversations with their kid, right? And then if their kid is behaving a certain, right? So that's where I see it. So it is like a village, right? They always say it takes a village. So we need good coaches, we need good parents, we need kids having proper conversations. And for me, it's always about asking the right questions. We don't need to have the right answers. We need to be asking the right questions so that we can think on our own and make decisions on our own. Because at the same token, whether you're an athlete or for me as a business owner, I didn't want to have to tell my employees everything. I want to see, can you think, can you problem solve? So I know that sort of kind of answers your question at the same time, but I feel like we've taken away some decision making from kids, from parents, from adults, because they're so used to be told. And there has to be a little bit of discovery, exploration, right? If we're going to have these well-rounded kids as well. So, I mean, some people do workshops and read books, but let's be honest, most of them aren't. So it's just kind of what they're picking up on the side. And it's like, oh, Susie offers lessons. Let's go. You know what I mean? And so like, we're just pushing everything 100% into the physical skills development. And we're forgetting about what makes like a well-rounded person. And to go back to what you said though, about like my kids, yes, they're like my husband and I. We're naturally aggressive, competitive people, right? You cannot teach that.
Lucky you.
Either. You might be able to foster and nurture it. So, my kids, but we have to ask them the right questions. Like my youngest one, you can't tell her anything. You cannot tell her anything. She's going to do the exact opposite, which everyone says like that's going to serve her well in life, right? So yeah. It's always asking the questions to get them to come up with a decision that leads that, and again, whether it's in sports or life, because isn't that what you need to do on the basketball court? Make a quick decision. Do I shoot? Do I pass? Do I dribble? You know what I mean? So.
No, this is amazing. So it's absolutely right. I see myself, right, and I have to catch myself. Hey man, I want these guys to be so tough. And maybe there's some you talk about, I'm gonna put my people put their kids, with these, trainers or these coaches. But even for myself, I'm thinking I have my own bias in terms of how I want my kids to be. Yep. Because of how I want them to have my personality. I don't want them, to be, and being like okay with them having their own personality. Mm-hmm. It sucks. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna go around it, right? It sucks. It sucks. I want them to be tough. I want them to not be scared. I want them, physically tough, mentally tough, and I want it now.
Right.
And as a parent, having to take a step back, I'm learning about this thing as they're learning about the sport. I'm learning to lay off. I'm learning, to essentially allow them to learn the psychology of sports as they're learning the physicality of sports while I'm learning how to parent an athlete. It's challenging, man. I'm not gonna lie. I think that takes us to your books, I think. So you got 4 books: soccer mindset, basketball mindset, softball mindset, basketball mindset, and they're all geared towards girls.
Yes.
So I why specifically for girls? Let me ask that before we go on. Why specific to girls? Because boys struggle.
Sure. So, all right. Well, I'm going to give it to you this. Do you go to the OBGYN and say, hey, men have problems too. Why don't you? Right. So.
Yes, I do. With my wife.
So it just, that's kind of my specialty, and that's what I know. And so like kind of going back on my story, I had a lot of different things happen, different trauma, different behaviors through sports and outside, and just really found like there's a gap for women. And that was something I saw as a business owner sometimes, is like what we're kind of the baggage we carry is a little bit different as women. Men and women do think differently. There's actually a like brain wiring, right? That's different, and learning. So we communicate differently. So when I was exposed to a lot of my girls in sports, I started observing things. And one of the first ones was a coaching experience they had where all the coaches were men. And I am not exaggerating when I say these men were yelling and screaming at 7-year-olds. I mean, screaming. And I'm like, you know what? We are teaching these girls that it's okay then for their future boyfriend, husband, employer to treat them like this. And I know as women and all the women I've worked with, you know, what goes in our heads. And if you've heard the imposter syndrome and everything else, and I'm like, holy moly, it's starting right here at 7 years old. And so some, and I'm not saying also, some sports experiences are very toxic. And I'm like, our girls can either become empowered leaders through their sports experience, or they're going to carry this fear and this self-doubt with them into womanhood. And so that was one thing. I was like, there's a huge gap, and there's somebody that needs to speak up. And I was somebody that spoke up in this organization, which parents were told they weren't allowed to talk. Well, later on, this one particular coach was actually dismissed. And I'm like, I'm going to conform to societal norms. I don't, there's plenty of teams out there. I don't care. You know what I mean? My kid isn't going to be, you know, subject to that. Well, then kind of what I noticed too with other places, how some kids were having a hard time handling things. And I'm like, there's just a gap. There's a need on the mental fitness part where, you know, coaches, they're doing a great job coaching the sport, right? Well, they need help with the mental fitness. So like with my teaching background, business background, so yeah, I created all these workbooks now that it's a tool that parents can use, coaches can use, and it teaches them life skills as well, but it's all very specific to the sport. So for example, my basketball mindset, all the situations are basketball related, but there's, you know, there's journal prompts, there's, you know, a lot of the how do you handle it. I call it reframe and fork in the road thinking, that you have a choice, like which thought pattern are you going to go down? Like we need to train that, because what some people don't realize is actually like happiness is 50% genetic. 50.
What?
Yes.
What?
Is 50% genetic. And so some people might be wired to where they have fear and negativity in their brain, and it really needs to be trained. So, you know what I mean? So
wow,
all unique, we're all different. So I put these together as a tool, and it's surpassed my expectation. The softball mindset has spent several weeks as an Amazon bestseller. I have people reaching out to me saying like within a week, my daughter's, you know, confidence changed. But it's all about making the kid come up with the answer, because Mike, you don't want anybody to tell you what to do you? If I told you, Mike, you have to do this, right? Well, it's the same for kids. They got to figure it out. So anyway, 10 to 12, really that 10-year-old is like the best time, I feel like, because as we know, 12-year-olds, and I know you have boys, but for girls, man, once we're starting to get into middle school is when things are really vulnerable. So if I can get them in that 10 to 12-year-old range and start empowering them to think about things and look at things from different perspectives, not only is it helping them be more mentally tough, be more resilient in their sport, but in life too.
Wow. That's so again, I don't have girls. I have boys. So let me first ask this. Can boys use these workbooks?
They could, but you know what? It's presented very.
There is girls in the front.
Yeah, it's you know, it's for girls. There's a little, because here's the other thing, Mike. Okay, let me go back. I was, I guess you could say, bullied in high school, constantly told that I was built like a linebacker. Your shoulders are so broad. Are you wearing shoulder
pads? Yeah. Oh man.
Do you know what I mean? Like people saying stuff about my body that way, right? And so a lot of times I've been even told I have a lot of masculine, you know what I mean? Like that was presented to me. So these just have a little bit of the feminine, you know,
I got you.
The pretty stuff in it. But yes, the concepts would apply to boys yes. It's just I made something specifically for girls, and this isn't out there. A lot of the other books I have seen typically are geared a little bit towards the male competitor too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, and plus I'm artsy and I like having this little creative, fun, pretty stuff too. So
Do you think, in your experience, you've written these books, these workbooks, in your experience, girls versus boys? So I coach boys, I have boys, and I find that boys, fourth, fifth grade, growing up into middle school, these guys, they're you talk about not wanting to listen, right? Or adults not wanting somebody to tell them what to do. These guys, they don't want they don't want us to tell them what to do. Like, they have their own personalities, their own minds. I'm gonna Like, you have to drill it again. A problem with our system, right? Where instead of learning, and like, you're starting off here, so you're being drilled, and they're like, no, I want to. You could tell, like, their mind is already made up on how they want to do this. So sometimes you're trying to coach a drill, and you're like, at this point, forget it, because this guy's not trying to do it the way I'm trying to coach it right now. Like, he doesn't want to. And I took it as, this is just a boy, part of becoming a man, right? Men don't want other people telling them what to do. Do you find that to be the same thing in young girls? Like, we're just gonna be, our own little, human beings. Like, we don't want you telling, or are girls more coachable, right? If I can use that term.
you know what? It depends on the individual. It depends on the individual. And I guess I feel like because of my years of experience, and when I taught high school, I ran the after school detention and the discipline committee. I feel like that was kind of one of my talents, is I could kind of figure out what each individual needed, if that makes, how to talk to them. So I think that's the challenge, is you cannot talk to every adult, every individual, every kid the same, right? Like, not everything is going to resonate with them, because we're all different. We're all unique. We've got convergent thinkers. We've got divergent thinkers. And so it's learning how to communicate with them. So, for example, giving a direction to 10 kids, right? 5 of them might take it and run with it and do what they're told. And the other 5, there might be like, well, wait a minute, I could actually do this better. I could do, right? And like, that's just the train of thought they go through. So it might not even be that they're being defiant. It might just be that they're like, oh, wait, no, I can do this better. Does that make sense? Like, it's just, we're different thinkers. And so it's learning how we think. And I think as a society, it's deciding, do we want kids? Do we want employees? Do we want people to try to think and formulate solutions on their own? Or do we want them to always do what they're told and you have to do it this way?
But all right, so you're taking me down a path now. Like, what is the balance?
Right?
So what is about so and I'm gonna be, again, transparent here. When I was, playing high school sports, maybe I should have been more divergent, right? Not listen to the coach, because I was very specific to what, run this play, run that play. And I figured out that some of the guys that were getting more playing time, they weren't always listening to the coaches. They were breaking the plays off and doing their own thing. So I see the benefit of that. But at what point are you like, you got to listen to the coach, especially growing up, you're learning the game. If I teach you, to do the drill and to position your body a certain way, at what point do I continue to drill it until they get it? Or I'm like, you know what, you're figuring it out on your own. You're going to put your own spin to it. That's got to be tough, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. And so, some situation, right? Let's say you say, let's run this play, and something happens to send it off, right? Because I've seen this before. And so a kid is like, I did exactly what the coach told me, but I still got yelled at because it didn't pan out, or XYZ. So that causes frustration for the kid at sometimes too. So again, everybody's going to have a different coaching style and a different communication style. And sometimes it's asking, the kids like, hey, okay, well, why do you think we should do this way? I'm all ears. Explain it to me. Why should we do it that way? And sure, there's times that you may be like, listen, that was a great idea, but I want you to try it this way. Can we try it this way first? But then again, like I said, when different situations in a game situation happen, sometimes we have to adjust. And I've seen that several times, and I've been frustrated for kids when they're like, I did what the coach told me to do, and I still got yelled at, versus because the kid felt they had to do it the coach's way versus making a decision on their own because something interrupted the play. Well, my kids are going to be the ones that they're going to adjust to the play. And it's happened to my kid before that like made a great play and still got yelled at because they didn't do it the way the coach wanted it. And that is,
oh, wow.
Even though the result, and it's like, so then it leads to frustration. So we've got a lot of different coaching styles. And I know we've heard in the different coaching spaces too, you know, different leadership, different coaching styles. The same with like in coaching, is someone an actual coach or are they just a headhunter that they just look for athletes that are great and they're trying to put them together and they're not actually coaching and developing? So there, you know, there's a lot of variabilities between the athlete and the coach because not all coach are the same. But yeah, there definitely should be a level of respect. There definitely should be. But I do believe sometimes, because again, I ran the after school detention and discipline committee, but there's times that I might ask, like, please explain it to me. Let me hear your perspective because maybe I am, you know, missing something completely. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you're like, well, you know what, we talked about this and the decision's made, I'm the coach. This is how we need to do it right now. And I need you to trust me. You know, we need to move forward. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That does. So that does. So it's just tough. I mean, I'm not a certified coach. I didn't go to, you know, coaching school or whatever it is, right? So I'm really just volunteering and coaching these youngsters, trying to pass on the game of basketball. The rest of us are, I think we have one person who's actually like a couple of people who are actually like coaches, but I just struggle as we're coaching these youngsters, these 4th and 5th graders, and it's like, man, again, they should have started playing in school. That way they would have learned the basics. So you're trying to teach them the fundamentals while at the same time allowing them to have the imagination so that they see things and not be robotic. While at the same time, you do have to listen to me. It's just a mess. So probably going back to the very beginning, this whole thing is a mess. And I don't know how we change it. We're just gonna do our best for these kids and help them along because it is so difficult. So I'm gonna leave it there because I could go on with this thing forever. My literally. So not to go back on what I just said, we had a game yesterday, and the team was, you know, they were beating us. They were more advanced in basketball, right? Our kids is more newbies. These kids that we played yesterday, obviously they've been playing together for quite some time. And our coach, she was like, let's run a press, a full court press. And she was, you know, diagramming it on her clipboard. And of course it didn't work. So at the end of the game, she's talking to us. She was like, I don't know what I was thinking. You know, we never practiced it. We never practiced what a press was. They don't know what it is. I don't know what I was thinking, but, you know, we got so caught up. She got so caught up in trying to win the game that she forgot that we hadn't learned that, right? We've spent the last several weeks just trying to build up the fundamentals. So just trying to get to the point where I don't even know the spots on the court. How do I know when to trap somebody? It's just so challenging in this environment. You know, it's just tough. I don't know about other sports. I'm sure there's challenges in other sports as well, softball, volleyball. Like, it's just privatization of sports, as I call it, is bad. And I don't know how we fix it. But anyway.
Yeah, like you said too, what kind of just go with what you said though is like we have to be okay with losing. Like we cannot win every game.
Oh my God.
Right?
Don't
like
say that.
We have to be okay. Well, I mean, because sometimes players get complacent, right? They get complacent and they get lazy if they win all the time. Well, that's something that I have seen. And there's a lot of talk sometimes in softball of teams that will go to these lower level tournaments just to win the trophy in the hard way.
Oh.
Well, what is that teaching? Do you know what I mean? So that's more what I'm saying. Like, yes, you want to give every effort to win. Like, yeah, I'm competitive. I want to win. But it's like, And like you said, sometimes you take a risk. Well, let's try it. Let's take this risk and see if this, and if that coach said, well, it didn't work out, what was I thinking? Right. But could be a coach that would blame it on the kids. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, and you're absolutely right. We have a lot of volunteers, and it's awesome that all these parents and coaches want to volunteer their time. But I think we need to realize we also have a responsibility that we really are forming and shaping a big part of these kids' realities, right? And their futures. And so that's why it is important they have a good experience, a learning experience. And so I just wanted to share one more thing with you about losing. When I go back to how my daughter was a runner-up Taekwondo national champion, and she actually, there was some other things that happened. She really should have won, but her grandmaster, who's from Korea, because I'm broken English, came up to her at the end. She's 10 and said, "I am glad you lost." Now, that was really hard for her to accept as a 10-year-old. But you and I, you know what he was trying to say, right? Do you know what he was trying to say?
Yes.
Right? He was glad that she didn't go to her first nationals and win.
Right? Yeah.
But she did. So we had to explain that to her. And so that's conversations I have with kids a lot too. Sometimes adults don't always communicate what they right, and we need to talk about it. And I think we know as a society, people aren't talking and communicating face to face as they much either. So anyway, just wanted to share that situation that with my daughter.
I'm glad you lost.
And he was right, but we knew the intent. We just had to explain it to her as to why he said that. He wasn't being malicious, but
That's hilarious. Yeah, we talk with our kids all the time. After they win, after they lose, like, hey, sometimes you have to lose. Here's why it's good to lose sometime. And it's an interesting. I'm learning a lot about myself in the process. So it's a good thing in certain ways, but in other ways, it's a terrible mix. I think, like, parents yelling down at kids all the time in the games. It's just terrible. And you're talking about. I keep going back to. Sorry, we're supposed to be moving on. But you talk about people playing down and winning games. Basketball is the worst at that, all right? I don't know about softball, but basketball is literally like the team we played against yesterday. They should not have been playing against us. It's terrible, but there is no true officiating body, right? So you put your team together. You've been playing together for 5 years. Our kids, 9 out of 10 of them, this is their first year playing basketball.
Yeah.
So of course you're gonna beat us. I don't know what lessons the winning team gets in that situation. I know our team doesn't get much out of it because they got blown out. They didn't get to practice any of the things they learned because the other team wouldn't let them get into it. So anyway, I'm gonna leave that alone because I'm gonna go on that forever, Summer. So let's.
It's in all sports, so you're sharing with basketball. Yes, you see in other sports as well.
Oh my gosh! All right. So you went from college, and your journey has taken you now to your business coach, personal development, helping women become fearless and things of that sort. Between that or before that, right? You owned a gym for a very long time. So how'd you go from college athlete to business owner, which you referenced, right? Owning a gym, training, personal trainer, and to where you are now, like. Talk us through that journey that got you to where you are now.
Sure. And I think that's a good lesson for kids and adults, even because, sometimes we go to college and we're like, I got my degree in this. And so I'm now going to do this for the rest of my life. Right. I work with a lot of women that sometimes have that struggle. And so I got my degree in health and physical education. I was a high school health teacher and ran the after school detention and discipline committee. I kind of always, for whatever reason, like the whole like behavioral or finding the kids that I felt like people gave up on was like always my thing. So I was going to be a dean. That's what I originally thought. I was going to get my master's in administration and be a dean. Well, of
a college.
No, actually at a high school, because the
high school
did have three like disciplinary deans because it was a large high school. And so I thought that's what I wanted to do, right? I always had a thing for wanting to connect with kids and find out, you know what I mean? Like from way back. I guess I was just kind of born that way. So fast forward, we moved. I did not look for a teaching job. I started personal training on the side. Within 2 months, I was at a YMCA making $8 an hour. I blew up and had all these personal training clients. They didn't even know what to do with me. Because again, this was over 20 years ago. Like this was just not heard of. I was doing small group personal training. And I even brought boot camp style workouts to our area over 20 years ago. And they just didn't know what to do. So a couple years later, based on one of my clients who was an accountant and also helped people start businesses, found a small gym, worked there for a couple years, outgrew it. And then, as I say, I had a heart attack. Like that's what I felt like, signing away this lease for a 6,000 square foot facility. So back in 2007, I opened a 6,000 square foot facility, and I looked at it as a teaching facility. You know, I'm like, there were so many things at the Y or so many at this other place that they told me, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I just had a different vision for impacting people. And my tagline was always achieve your personal best. And I still use that to this day. So I built this personal training business, but along the way, see, I had become a national champion in fitness back in 2004. And I started training other physique athletes. Well, I ended up training the one and only 3-time Bikini Olympia champion out of my gym. And I started having people fly in from all over the world to little old Akron, Canton, Ohio to train with me. But when I had my daughter in 2011, my mom had passed away in 2006. And when I had my daughter in 2011, I was just overcome with such grief and hormones, and it just triggered a lot of things that I was overcome with such severe postpartum depression and anxiety that I did end up spending a week in the hospital. And it was through that I said, like, man, if I can get through this, I can get through anything. And, you know, I have to be a voice for other women that are suffering in silence. Because it like ripped open all these wounds of trauma and other things that had happened in my past, in addition to losing my mom. So after I had my first daughter, within a couple of years, even though I had this award-winning, you know, elite athlete and other elite athletes, I'd even trained some people trying to move up in the minor leagues to major league and baseball. I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. It didn't feel right. So I had a woman in my office one day. She was about 40 years old, and she was crying because she hadn't won a particular type of trophy at one of these contests. And she, you know, was married but didn't have kids. And I just sat there thinking, this is not a real problem, that I did not want to use my talents for that anymore. And so I stopped training competitive athletes. I pivoted to even some like older adults and such, because my mom died at the age of 55. So I started a program, co-wrote a book called Forever Fit for people 55 and over. My dad didn't start working out till he was 72, and he's now 80. Circles around anyone. So I just kind of shifted, right? But that teaching background, right, and all these different sports things, like they all intertwined. And so I kind of got burnt out from running the gym and just really felt like there were bigger uses to use my talents. I had started this Fearless Academy for women to really help women, you know, feel empowered and, you know, go after their goals, and not in a rah-rah way. Anybody who knows me knows like I am not like this rah-rah person, but I'm about, you know, women using their voice, you know, going after their dreams. But anyway, I closed my business. I actually just sold it in February of 2024. Wasn't 100% sure, but all of a sudden here I am. I've already published 4 workbooks. I just kind of fell into it, but it was like I had to close that chapter to even allow life to bring me this new problem that needed to be solved. And I look at it as, yes, I always want to help women, but because I'm helping young girls in sports, I am helping women. I am helping those moms, and I'm reaching them, and it's kind of a full continuum. So anyway, that's my condensed like 25-year history. But I also like to let people know, like, you can reinvent yourself at any time. Like, just because my degree is in health and physical education, like I've had people that be like, well, if your parents paid for that, wouldn't they be mad you're not doing, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
people are so closed box thinking. And I'm like, no. And the other thing is, I am so thankful for all the pain that I've had to endure, because I would not be able to help people in the capacity that I am today had I not been subjected to all that pain. Like, I just, trust me, there's even more. I just was like, yep, all right, there's another lesson. There's a reason for me to have to go through this now so that I can help people move forward. So that's kind of what I'm all about, is how can you continue to move forward and achieve your personal best, because your journey shouldn't be like anyone else's. And again, I'm all about being a fearless decision maker, you making decisions for yourself. So there you go.
That's a powerful story. So on back to the gym, right? And then we'll get back to the women's empowerment thing. So back to the gym. How do you start a gym? Serious question. How do you start a gym? Like, I'm thinking, like, you see, the big time gyms, LA Fitness, whatever, Go Gym, whatever it is. Like, how do you even go about starting a gym? And I asked this as someone who actually had that thought of wanting to do it, and I got overwhelmed by what it would actually take. And I know there are people in my audience who love fitness, who would want to do this, right? What are like tangible steps you would say, hey, look at this resource, check this out, do this, do that, right? Like, if you're thinking of starting a gym, here's a bit of a blueprint. What would you say to that?
Okay. Well, first of all, there's two different types of gyms. So mine was more of a personal training studio that we offered a lot of services, right? Like, a gym could be here, you pay your $50 a month, you just come in and work out on your own. So that's a different business model. I tried to have both at once, and I ended up closing the open gym side because it was interfering with the services, right? And I was more about transformation. See, I can't help transform the lives of people that just come in and want a place to work out. I wanted to transform. So for the personal training end, how I opened mine, though, is I had built up a clientele. See, I had started out of other places, and I had people that wanted to follow me, because in any business, you could have a great idea. And I see this all the time, even with other authors. I wrote a book, but no one's buying it. If you don't know how to market and you don't know how to sell, then it doesn't matter your business, right? So that really needs to be your number one thing. What's going to be your marketing plan? How are you going to get customers? How are you going to obtain customers? And what is going to be your sales process? Because unless you're just doing this as a hobby and have unlimited resources, how are you going to pay your bills? So that's one of the biggest mistakes, I guess, I see in people who truly want to run a business, is they forget that is actually 66% of it is marketing and sales, right? So that's what I would say is, like, if you were just going to open a gym, like, is there a need in your area? What is the, competition like? How much is your rent going to be? Because that was a thing too, man, the spaces of rent all over the place. And then how many members do you need just to offset the rent? How many members now you've got, so breaking down the numbers, you really need to know your numbers. So I also had to get good at numbers and metrics, right? Of what percentage of things behind the scenes. But I got to be completely honest. Anyone who's in the gym personal training industry will tell you it is one of the toughest businesses, because it's so forward facing. It's so, on time, delivering a service. Somebody has to be there, especially in the personal training. There's been a lot of ups and downs, obviously, over the years since 2020 and so forth. There's just a lot to it. And so I know a lot of gym business owners that they'd be in their businesses 14 and 15 hours a day. And it's like, you have to think about, is that how you want to live? Because it seems easy to be like, oh, I'm going to hire this person and they're going to do this. Well, I've been lucky that, again, I mentored and onboarded, my employees a certain way, but I know tons of people that Joey didn't show up for work today. Right? You know what I mean? It's like, so
right.
There's a lot to think about, what your goals are, and then what is going to be, how profitable are you going to be able to be at the end of the day? So sorry, I know I threw a lot at you, but there's a lot of things to look at. But the numbers, the marketing, the sales really has to be the number one thing. And then what's your point of difference? Why is somebody going to come to your gym and not the gym down the road? So what's your point of difference?
That whole, everything you just said is what discouraged me. And I'm not a personal trainer, right? So I was looking at it as, I was going to open a gym and it was going to be the solution to, the bigger gyms out there. But yeah, that I was like, that's too much to think about. I mean, I was reading stuff and I was like, I don't have the money. I made all the excuses in the world. Now, having a better mindset, could I have done it? Probably so. And that's probably something I would think, in your new line of work now, mindset, having the right mindset is a lot of, while you do have to market and sell, but having the right mindset probably gets you a lot of the way there. Whereas having the wrong mindset, even if you do know how to sell, you're going to sell yourself short and you're not going to do find your purpose. And you're not going to do what you're meant to do anyway. So how do you, transitioning out to what you do now, right? How do you, incorporate all of that sports background, failures, resilience into your current business, which is helping women to become fearless, right?
Oh, how do I incorporate it? Well,
how does all that get incorporated into becoming? So all of your experience make up you, right? And they inform what you put out to the world and what you teach your students. So how does all that come together and you incorporate that into your current business venture?
Sure. So I broke things down into kind of a framework, right? Like looked at here's where I wish I would have started, right? So like my job, my purpose is also to help people have a shorter or the least path of resistance, right? I made the mistakes. I went through this and I learned. So I kind of built a framework. So it's my fearless framework. And here's the steps. Here's the foundation that through like my course that I take women through, right? But then I support them on the other end answering, or I shouldn't say I answer, I ask a lot of questions to help them come up with the answers to move them through whatever it's dealing with. So for example, I get a lot of women that are moms that are maybe veering in their second act because maybe their kids are older now. So I actually get a lot of women that are more towards 50 that maybe want to go back into the career force. Like they were career driven, but they didn't really get to do it because they were raising their kids. And so now they're reinventing themselves. Like I have a client who she's 54 and she just got this really high VP job outside of DC, right? So like you're 54 and you know what I mean? And so just helping empower her. And so I helped her through leading a new team because again, sports, employees, all this, right? So I helped her and she said that now the even higher ups from her are asking her, how have you done this? And it's because of the coaching of what we did. So I meet people where they're at. One of my business coaches has called me the performance genie because he says that I do a really good job of taking lots of their bits and pieces and turning it into like small critical nuggets. And I can kind of help them with their 3 wishes because I have such a vast background between mental health, physical health, business, personal development. But I'm good at breaking things down and making it small. See, I feel like, I go back in fitness when P90X came out and I was like, the general person shouldn't be starting with P90X. They need to start at the ground level. And when we skip all these steps is when we get frustrated. So that's how I teach people, no matter what it is, what's the first step? And let's keep building on it because you need a strong foundation for your long-term future success. So even going back to business, and I don't know if you can see behind me, but like I won 3 best business awards, not fitness business awards in my town. There's a thing to having longevities. Like I see people that they start a fitness program or they want to open a business, but they can't last for the long run, right? You need to start solid and strong and have that foundation. So that's kind of my biggest piece of advice to people overall. That's how I help my women. And that's the same with these workbooks, is it should be easily digestible, that you can implement it right away. Because this country, we're all about the bells and whistles. We already talked about it, right? Oh, we got to competing. We got to do this. You got to do this. You got to, and we forgot to go back to the basics. That's where a lot of the success is, right? Go back to
what is, in your mind, what is the basics? What is that right foundation?
Well, I mean, for one thing is, do you wake up and drink water in the morning? Like, people have forgotten to do that. And hydration, water, right? I'm sure you know how important water is. And now you're probably like, why is she talking about water? But this is like one little simple thing that I have clients that struggle with this. They just can't drink water.
They can't drink water? Wow.
Or they're just too busy, you know what I mean? Or they forget, or they go straight to coffee because that's what society told us, right? And it's like, but water and hydration, it helps, you know, temperature control. It removes toxins. When you're not hydrated, you probably get a headache. We know we need our athletes, right? Like, so something as simple as water is one of my number one things that I start with people. I'll take a drink there.
Wow, drinking water. So drinking water, I'm trying to get my mindset right. Yep. How do you get me from drinking water and my foundation to now my mindset is right and I'm ready to go conquer the world?
Well, that sounds like some big steps in
Yes. So talk us through the levels.
So one of my first core concepts that I go over with people is deciding, like actually sitting down, taking time, deciding what it is you want. So when you say conquer the world, well, what is that? What does that look like to you? So, you know, I often, my women in particular, you know, I'll be like, what do you want it to look like when you get up? You know, like what, it's kind of like this ideal day formula of what do you want it to look like? Like, you know, what would you feel fulfilled and happy? Because that's different for everyone. And sometimes when women go through that in particular, at the end, they'll be like, wait a minute, what I thought I really wanted, I actually don't. And then other are like, wow, I'm too far off. Others are like, oh, maybe I'm not that far away. So it's a lot of self-awareness. Like, so what is it you want? And some people cannot even verbalize that in the beginning. And I'm a big pen to paper person. I think we've taken that away a lot in our society. And there's psychological, physiological benefits of actually taking pen to paper and writing this out. It helps.
Physical pen, not typing, physical pen.
Right. Yep. Yeah. That it helps you process things better. So that's what we start with, is kind of like this decision phase, or deciding what do you want. So that's the first phase. The second would be taking kind of an inventory of creating boundaries, because a lot of my women have some people in their lives that are actually trying to sabotage them from meeting their goals. And sometimes it's a harsh reality. So we do like a happiness audit where we kind of are like, you know, so I take them through some activities where we kind of look at people that might be toxic, that maybe we need to like try to put some boundaries up. And for women, that's a hard thing sometimes. A lot of women are people pleasers. They say yes to everything. Is learning how to say no in a way that they feel good about, and just creating boundaries. So that's kind of like, I guess the simplest way is, because in order for you too to go on and conquer the world, you can't have all these distractions, right? And that's often an excuse people will say, well, I can't do this because Susie called me, my friend called me, and they need me to go help them move, or whatever it is, right? And so it's like, well, wait a minute. Now you got to decide, is that more important, or is you going on to conquer the world more important?
See, but then when we do that, we're seen as selfish. We're not good friends, right? Like I can see that being problematic. Like how do you tell your friend, hey, I need you? And you're like, no, I got to work on my business here. Sorry.
Well, you don't say it that. You don't necessarily.
You're not gonna say it that way, but it's.
Well, so that's the thing, Mike. These are decisions we have to make in our lives, though, right? Like, how good of a friend are they? Or are they the friend that only calls you when they need something? See, that's different too. And so those are decisions we have to make. And that's why everybody's, situation is different. So I help women through that, because if they're constantly, taking care of this and that, they're never going to get to their goals. So for example, for me, I honestly had to make a decision to close a chapter of running a brick and mortar and overseeing employees and overseeing a building to create the space to work on what I knew there was something bigger, more impactful, more powerful that I needed to do. But I was never going to have the brain space to do it if I constantly had to take care of this, right? Like, it was just time to close that chapter.
Valid point. I agree. But then there's an aspect of fear, the unknown. How do you overcome that? Because if I'm running a successful gym, making 6-7 figures, whatever it is, but my mind is telling me there's something better out there. How do you overcome that fear of, man, I got to let go of my 9-to-5 job that's paying me so well to do this? How do I get over that?
For sure, you're right, and that was a big thing, because even my accountant and even people who were looking at my business were like, why do you want to sell? You have such a great business. And it just comes a point sometimes where like your heart, like, it's just not in alignment, and so different types of burnout are real. But just like when I opened the business, I took a risk. Like, I was signing my life away. Like, I had to sign personally for 5 years on this building. It was all me. So even in the beginning, right, I was taking a risk. So I just, I'm obviously a different person now than I was then, but like, I just had to be willing to take that risk. And luckily, my husband has a job and, had that. So same thing with selling the business, going, okay, have I set aside enough? Are we, just looking at different things to take that risk. But at the end of the day, sometimes you have to realize like your mental health, your physical health. And then for me, because my mom has been gone for so long, and I don't want to be morbid, but it's like, do I only have 7 years left in my life like she did? And how do I want to spend it? And so, I look at it from a different perspective, and I'm like, I want to be there for my kids. I want to enjoy their sports experiences. And from the same token, it's like, wait a minute, here I am. I've been a certified strength conditioning specialist. If I can help at your practice, I want to be, you know what I mean? Like, I want to come and watch. I want to be that parent that watches my kids or takes the kids, right? And so I feel like that's giving back too. And yes, I'm starting over. I didn't necessarily intend that it was going to be through these workbooks. I had a coach that told me a long time ago that I'd be really good at writing a book and doing workbooks. And so sometimes you just have to believe, going back to something you said earlier about your mindset, your belief, that strong belief in you, that's really all that matters. And I don't know if you have ever listened or followed TD Jakes, but I love one of his quotes are like, I don't need you to believe in my dream. Only I need to believe in my dream. And I feel that is one of the most powerful things. So like, I'm just the type of person, I am going to see it through. Like, I'm going to try to make things work. And I feel like with these workbooks, because I'm leading with heart, I'm leading with passion, and I'm not leading with profit whatsoever, it's really working. Does that make sense to you? I feel like the universe sometimes, repays you in that way. Like, I'm not looking at it as a business. I'm looking at it as, this is like a calling. This is a purpose. And this is how I'm serving people. So that's how I kind of got to where I am now.
Yeah, that's I could spend the next hour talking about this because one of my guests I just had on recommended this book to me, A Happy Pocket Full of Money. I don't know if you've heard of that book. And it's a crazy book. It challenges every belief you've had about life and money and like the universe and everything. It's just a wild book. I listened to it on Audible, but it talks about that, about, when you find your purpose and you're walking in your purpose, the things even if it's a business, quote unquote, meant to make you money, right? But giving to people and empowering people will come back to you in the forms of wealth that, unimaginable. And it challenges the concept of, I just got to go make money. I have to go sell, I have to go make money. And it's like, no, you do these things and it will materialize into wealth. Anyway, that's a whole different conversation. I could spend on that. But all right, so we're getting rid of people, right? We're getting rid of people. We're at that's the next level, right? Of we're calling them leeches.
Yes,
we're getting rid of we're getting rid of those who aren't really boosting us towards our purpose, right? So we're getting closer to that mindset. What now?
So we've decided we're creating boundaries. My third concept then is like reframing. So a lot of women in particular have baggage that's holding them back. A lot of times they're holding themselves in the past. That's internally they're telling themselves they're not good enough. And so we go through reframing maybe past things, and then the same thing with the future. And I teach some of this in the workbook, is like fork in the road thinking. Well, now you're faced with this. Are you going to make this thought pattern or this thought pattern? So I call it fork in the road thinking. So we have to change how we think about things, right? So, and again, I know men do experience some of these things too. Just women, I'm closer to working with women, but some men have been like, hey, I have the same thing, that I feel like I'm not good enough either. So, we go through this process, like I said, reframing, and there's a lot of like writing exercises or talking through this so that we can start allowing ourselves to be successful. Quite honestly, sometimes we're standing in the way of our own success. So we have to allow ourselves to take that next step. And just like training, muscles, we got to train, well, what thought pattern am I going to take so I can keep moving forward? So that's kind of like my reframe section.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're starting with the foundation. We've gotten rid of some folks. We're reframing our thinking patterns. And then
now we go into the commit phase. So now we're committing. What is it we're committing to do? Well, I typically have a foundation of healthy habits, because that's something too. You don't want to make this great business and then you're literally killing yourself in the process because you've let, your health go to the wayside. So we do look at things, like I said, like drinking water, eating more fresh foods. I start with a lot of people who aren't exercising with committing to 10 minutes a day and then working up, because a lot of people have this all or nothing mentality too. We've talked about foundations and taking steps. Well, some people's all or nothing mentality is what's holding them back, because it's hard for them to do little things. So that's just one example.
True.
Yeah.
That's me right there.
All or nothing, right?
That's 100% me.
Right.
I'm telling you, you may work with women, but I'm seeing myself in these things, right? So go on. I'm getting a free session here. Go on. Yes.
Well, that's a lot of men say that. It's just also through like my Fearless Academy for Women. I wanted to create a safe space for women that they also felt, other, that they feel safe. So, so anyway, through the commit phase, different things that we're going to commit. And so, we're also teaching, how to structure your time, what are you going to be working on? And that's why going back to learning how to say no, because if you're on a deadline to do XYZ, for example, I've had a client, it's like every time we would talk, she'd pick up a new volunteer role. And I'm like, at some point, you have to say no. You know what I mean? Like, or not now, like not now. And I've had to do the same thing, that there's been passion, like, sure, I'd love to be part of this organization, but it doesn't fit right now. If I'm on a path, and this is why some people never get things done, right? This is why some people never meet their goals, is they start taking on too many things. So in this commit phase, we're kind of, blocking out what it is, what we're going to work on. And like I said, I have this framework, but it's through a lot of the one-on-one coaching conversations that I have with my clients, because I have a lot of them that have been with me 2 years or longer, that I just I know how to ask them the right questions to help them move forward or, process, because sometimes it is 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back. I have a lot of women that are in the sandwich generation, meaning not only are they caring for their kids, but they're now caring for their parents. And so, and if they have a career, and if you have kids in sports, how are you managing all this? So they just need me to help them, right? Kind of keep it all in place with a real smile on your face too.
Lord, you are speaking to me right now.
Yeah.
A free session. Thank you. I'll take it. My goodness. Wow. So we got the basics down, simple as drinking water. We got the boundaries. We're committed. Did I skip a step between boundaries and commitment?
So we go decide, create, and boundaries falls under the create, because we're also creating some other good habits. Reframe and commit. So like those are my 4. Yeah, those are kind of my 4 building blocks or the process. So decide, create, reframe, commit.
Decide, create, reframe, commit. 4 steps to changing your mindset and succeeding at life. Awesome. I'll take it. And try to put this stuff into practice. So my majority of my audience is guys. I think I mentioned this to you.
Yes.
Majority of my audience is guys. But I've seriously taken a lot from this podcast, this episode, and I hope my audience has as well. From talking about, women in sports. I don't have daughters, but I feel the pain, and I know many of my listeners have daughters that they'll have to watch out for and look out for as they go through youth sports.
Mm-hmm.
And their wives can listen and follow you to how to become the best version of themselves. So this has been awesome, Summer. I appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you?
Thank you.
Because we've been at this for like an hour and a half, and I could go on for more, but I don't want to lose too many more people trying to listen to this whole thing.
Thank you. Well, as far as I know, I'm the only Summer Montabone out there. So I'm on Facebook primarily because I guess I'm of that generation. So I'm primarily on Facebook.
Man, you're an old head.
Kids tell me that all the time. I'm on Instagram as well. Well, I'm also like in such creation mode sometimes, so I'm not on social media a ton, but yeah, pretty much Instagram, Facebook. So Summer Montabone, that's my website is summermontabone.com. And same thing on Amazon, the workbooks. I mean, if you search the volleyball mindset or softball mindset, it'll come up, or same thing if you searched my name, the workbooks. So yeah, that's usually the easiest place to find me. And I am someone that if someone genuinely, has a question or reaches out to me, yes, I'm a real human and I do respond, to that person, because I just believe, we're here to help each other out and we can leave other people better than we found them, then we're doing our job.
We're not AI. Summer is not AI, guys.
Not AI. It's me.
She will respond. No, that's awesome. So that's Summer Montabone. You'll find it in the show notes. I'll have everything there, all the books and everything. You guys reach out to her. I think she's great. Your perspective is awesome, coming from a former athlete, a D1 star. You predated Signe McLaughlin. You were the forerunner.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't compare my athletic career to any of those. I will say a lot of my college experience helped me become a better coach, and I'm thankful for that. So,
no, that's great. Yeah, Sydney's ridiculous.
Right? She is. Yes.
Yeah. No, thanks for being on. I had a great time. Learned a lot. I like to learn. I love my audience, but I tell all my guests, if they don't learn anything, I will. Sorry, guys. But I'm sure they will as well. You're awesome. This has been great. I wish you much continued success in your journey. I think what you're doing is awesome. Awesome work for girls and men alike. The men they encounter will find some, tremendous women, that they'll want to be around. So
yes,
I'll take that. That's a win for everybody.
Yes.
So we'll leave it there, guys. Thank you for joining. As always, don't forget to subscribe and like and share. Go to the website, Summer, I'll invite you to be part of the website. We'll talk about it off air. But you can, find all the show notes and everything like that to reach out to Summer. But it's been great. Mike, sports to the real shit. I'm going to catch you guys next time. You guys be good. Peace.
I'm going straight to the top. Just put the sec on the clock. I am Rihanna's a shot. I'm going straight to the top.